All right, today we're going to do something a little different. We're basically jumping into a time machine, heading back about 2,000 years to look at this ancient legal text. And our goal is to unpack the honestly brilliant and sometimes surprising logic these ancient thinkers used to solve some really fascinating puzzles. So let's just dive right in.
So let me just start with a question. When does a plant, or when does anything officially become food? It sounds kind of philosophical, right? Almost like a late-night debate. But for these ancient sages, this was not an abstract question at all. It had incredibly real, super serious legal consequences.
And here's exactly why that question was so important. It all comes down to a system called tithing. Now, tithing was this ancient agricultural law where you had to set aside a portion of your produce as a religious offering. But, and this is the crucial part, that rule only applied to things that were legally classified as food. So you can see why getting that definition right was, well, everything.
Okay, so that brings us to our first case file, if you will. Let's call it the case of the bitter almonds. And you're about to see how one simple nut could spark this huge legal debate.
Now, on the surface, the first law we see seems totally straightforward. According to this text called the Mishnah, sweet almonds are considered food when they're large and ripe. Makes total sense, right? But bitter almonds are kind of the opposite. They're only considered food when they're small and unripe, before they get too bitter to eat. Once they grow large, they're basically inedible, and so they're exempt. Seems pretty cut and dry, doesn't it?
Well, not so fast, because the next generation of scholars comes along, and in a text called the Gemara, they look at this rule and they do what great legal minds always do. They ask, wait a minute, are we missing something here? What if there's another way to look at this? What if those big, bitter, supposedly inedible almonds could actually be food after all?
And this right here is where things get really clever. A sage named Rabbi Yochanan comes in with this total game changer of an idea. He says, look, I get it. You can't just pick a ripe, bitter almond off a tree and eat it. But what if you roast it? See, roasting them on a fire gets rid of that bitterness, and suddenly they're totally edible. And that's the key. The almond has the potential to become food.
So bam, there's our first big principle we're uncovering. An object's legal status isn't just about what it is right now. It's also defined by its potential, what it could become through some human action. That bitter almond isn't food in its current state, but the potential is there. It's on a path to becoming food.
Okay, so let's take that idea of potential and see how it gets even more complicated in our second case file. This one's a little trickier. We're moving on from almonds and diving into the, well, kind of strange world of this beverage made from grape leftovers. It's called temed.
So what is this stuff? It's actually pretty simple. You take all the things left over after making wine, the grape skins, the stems, all that, and you soak it in a specific amount of water. And then you just wait. If things go right, the leftover sugar in those husks will cause it to ferment, and you end up with this sort of weak, wine-like drink. The basic rule for this steamed stuff seems to follow a clear logic. Before it ferments, it's legally just considered water. Water with some grape stuff in it. Not food, not tithable. But after it ferments and tastes like wine, its whole legal status flips. It becomes a proper beverage, and boom, it is now tithable. The transformation changes its legal reality. But you knew it wasn't going to be that simple, right? A huge debate kicks off about how to even define this fermented temed. On one side, you have the rabbis. They're arguing from a substance point of view. They're like, listen, if you put a gallon of water in and you get a gallon of liquid out, it's still just flavored water, no matter how it tastes. But then on the other side, you have Rabbi Yehuda. And he says, nope, the most important thing is taste. If it looks like wine and it tastes like wine, you treat it like wine. I mean, these are two completely different ways of defining the exact same thing.
Okay, so hold on, because this is where it gets really, really wild. This whole debate leads them to a question that is honestly kind of mind-bending. They ask, what if the future could actually change the past?
And this question gives birth to this incredible legal concept, retroactive clarification. Get this, here's how it works. Let's say you buy the unfermented temed when it's still just grape water. A few days later, it ferments. The idea is that this future event, the fermentation, actually reaches back in time to clarify the nature of your original purchase. It reveals that what you bought wasn't just water. It was always potential wine. The future literally redefines the past. It's a wild concept.
So after all that, what's the big picture here? What can we take away?
I mean, these aren't just some quirky old arguments about nuts and grape water. This is a really sophisticated attempt to build a coherent, logical system for defining the world around us. Think about it. Through just these two puzzles, the sages have given us 4 distinct lenses to define reality. First, there's potential, what something can become, like the bitter almonds that can be roasted. Second, substance, what it's physically made of, like the rabbi's argument about the water. Third, appearance and taste, what it seems to be, which was Rabbi Yehuda's whole point. And finally, the craziest one, retroactivity, how the future can define the past. 4 totally different frameworks.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. These ancient debates push us to ask something very, very modern. How much of our own world, from a tiny startup company to a student in a classroom, is defined not by what it is right now, but by its potential, by what we believe it could one day become? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me today.